unemployment 7% and whatever, 7.3%, let's say. If we pass this stimulus, unemployment will go up to about 8%, and then it will peak, and then it'll start coming down. If we do nothing, unemployment might almost get up to 9%. And can you imagine how awful that would be? People, oh my God, well that's worth spending $787 billion. You don't want unemployment to get up to almost 9%. That would be inconceivably bad. So they passed the stimulus, and unemployment went above 10%. Right? So let me make sure you got that it was around 7%. They told the American people, let us spend all this money to keep it under 8, because if you don't, if we just let the free market run, it might get as high as almost 9%. They did get to spend the money, and it went up to like 10.2%. So you would think, surely the Keynesians will say, we were wrong. No, they said, it's a good thing we passed that stimulus, because otherwise unemployment might have been 15%. Right? And that's what they said. Okay, so you can see it's non-falsifiable. And it's a funny episode, but in fairness, that's the way economics is. There's no controlled experiments. I mean, you could imagine a medical analogy, and if someone has cancer and the doctor comes in and says, we have to do this aggressive chemotherapy or else it might spread over here. If we don't do anything, it might spread to your legs, and then they can go ahead and do the aggressive therapy, and it might spread to the legs anyway. And you could imagine the doctor saying, well, it was worse than we realized. And that one episode wouldn't disprove the efficacy of chemotherapy. It might just mean you had a bad doctor, or just legitimately they didn't understand how bad it was. So it's the same thing here, but the point is, the Austrian economists were saying, they weren't giving specific estimates and saying unemployment will be 10.2%, but they were saying, look, at what's going on here is the economy is recovering from the huge distortions that Alan Greenspan set in motion by pushing interest rates too low. Too many resources went into housing, into the financial sector. American households were living beyond their means, spending far more than their income justified because they were misled by rising asset prices. So the way you fix that is you just let prices come down, let firms go bankrupt, let resources get reallocated to where they should be. And if the government comes in during that process and borrows $787 billion and spends it on political projects, that just makes things worse, right? That's like kicking the economy when it's already injured, because you don't make the economy richer, you don't help the readjustment process by having politicians seize $787 billion more. All right, so that's the idea. So in terms of that one interaction, if you're going to evaluate theories based on their predictive power, you would have to say that's a point for the Austrians. But of course, the Keynesians don't say that. They still think that, in their mind, they're totally flawless. Another 2 episodes, and then I'll stop for your questions. So on December 27th of 2008, Paul Krugman had a blog post called Hangover Theorists. And I think most of you know who Krugman is. He's a Nobel Prize winner economist, very Keynesian, probably the most famous living Keynesian economist. So he's deriding the Austrian view as a hangover theory, because he's saying in the Austrian view, well, it's like the Hayek Keynes rap video, right? That the Austrians think that we're being punished for our sins during the boom period, which, it's not that it's moralistic, but yeah, there's just some truth to that. But Krugman's using the term to show how silly it is and how medieval and laced with morality it is, whereas Krugman thinks we have to be just technocratic scientists. So he says that he's got 2 main objections to this type of theory. So he says, on the one hand, so this is a quote from him, why didn't we need high unemployment elsewhere to get those people into the nail-pounding in Nevada business? So what he's saying is that if the Austrian explanation of what's happening during the recession is we had too many workers in housing pounding nails in the state of Nevada, because that's where the housing bubble was really intense, he's saying, well, how come during the boom years, during the bubble years, we didn't have high unemployment in non-construction industries in order to funnel all the workers into building houses? Okay, so there, it's almost so easy to explain that it takes you a minute to understand what his problem is. So he's saying, why isn't there a symmetry between the boom and the bust? But that's because, again, this issue of what the theory is, the Austrians are saying what happened is during the bubble years, the boom years, loosely speaking, the Fed comes in and starts handing out money to politically favored bankers and investment projects, so then they can go into the labor markets and start bidding more for workers. So wages start going up, so people who are unemployed start taking jobs, and then people in existing jobs quit to go take better jobs. You know, if you can get a better job in construction in the year 2004, that's what you're going to do. Right? So you're not going to see the national unemployment rate go up, you're going to see it go down. Because, again, the reason these sectors are expanding is because more money is being created out of thin air and dumped into those sectors. So that's why you don't see unemployment go up. But then when the bust happens, now all those expanding sectors realize we made mistakes, and they start firing people, laying people off, and those workers have to take pay cuts to go work at jobs that they don't like as much, and so people are reluctant to do that. And so that's why you see the ranks of the unemployed rise during the bust period. Okay, so that's why there's that asymmetry. It's because in the beginning they're just throwing money around that they create out of thin air, and so you suck workers into the new jobs by offering higher wages. Okay, and then Krugman goes on, he has another objection. He says, so again, he's writing at the end of 2008, he says, look, I'm looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, and it's ranking states, U.S. states, by the rise in their unemployment rates over the past 12 months. And he said it's true that some of the states that had really big housing bubbles are high in the rankings in terms of unemployment, but other states like Georgia, Alabama, and the Carolinas, North and South Carolina, are also high in the unemployment increases, but yet they weren't states that were particularly struck by the housing bubble. So he's saying, you know, you Austrians or you hangover theorists, how can you explain that? If this is all about the economy responding to the mistakes of the housing bubble years, then why do we see some of the states with the worst increase in unemployment, you know, being states that didn't have a particularly big housing bubble? So he's trying to say this isn't about the housing bubble, this is just about a fall in total spending. So that seems suspicious to me. Like, I mean, forget Austrian business cycle. The Krugman was saying the recession as of the end of 2008 didn't have much to do with the housing collapse. And so I was thinking about what his test there was, and so he was writing in the end of 2008, looking at the increase in a state's unemployment rate over the previous 12 months. So he was looking from December 2007 to December 2008, looking at those states that had the biggest increase in their unemployment rate, and then saying that wasn't overlapping very nicely with the states that had the biggest housing bubble and bust. But that's not surprising because the housing bubble didn't burst in December 2007, right? So what I did is I did a more accurate test. I said, let's look at from the middle of 2006, when the housing boom was at its peak and then started to collapse, from that point to the present, when I was writing in the end of 2008, and look at the overlap between states ranked in terms of, you know, how much did their housing prices collapse and how much did their unemployment go up. And there, if you looked at the top 6 states in both rankings, 5 of the states were the same. Okay, so it was only one state that wasn't different. And so, you know, if you were going to do that, what are the chances randomly that would just happen depending on how you frame the problem? It would either be 1 in 8,400 or 1 in 350,000. That could just be random like that. So, you know, it seemed like there was a relationship there much stronger than what Krugman had said because he wasn't really looking at the proper thing. If you're going to use the housing bubble to explain unemployment, you should look at from when the bubble burst to the moment in question. Okay, and then the last thing that more recently here, this last episode, was in August 24th of 2010. He had another blog post, Paul Krugman did, called Hangover Theory at the Fed. So again, he's hitting this issue in Krugman's mind. You know, so he's always just taking it in stride, never admitting, okay, yeah, the last test we did was a little bit wrong. Just always in his mind, you know, I'm surrounded by idiots. All these people keep saying these dumb theories, and we keep refuting them. So here, what he said was that, look, the question at the time was there was a Fed president, not an Austrian, but one of the Fed regional presidents, that was saying, look, the Fed can't fix these structural problems of unemployment because there are too many workers in construction that don't have the right skills to go over into other sectors, and so it's just going to take time to retrain them, and we can't solve that by printing money, right? So this particular Fed regional president was trying to say, let's stop printing money. That's not going to fix the recession problem because this is a problem about, you know, having the wrong skills. So Krugman didn't like that there. He's trying to make fun of it, and so the way Krugman thought he was going to look at the data to show that it was wrong is he showed a chart of manufacturing employment compared to construction employment. And he was looking at absolute numbers and showed that from the start of the recession to when he was writing in 2010 in the summer, that construction employment fell off less than manufacturing, right? So there were more jobs lost in manufacturing than in construction. So Krugman says, aha, see? If these hangover theory people were right, if this is really just about the economy responding to the housing bubble, you would expect more jobs in construction to have been lost than in manufacturing, but it's the other way around. So see, we're right, this is about spending, this isn't about a particular sectoral adjustment problem. Okay, so the problem there from an Austrian perspective, there's two things. One is he was looking at the absolute numbers. You know, there are more people in manufacturing. So the fact that 100,000 people lost their jobs compared to 80,000 in construction, that per se doesn't matter since, you know, the percentage change is more interesting. But the other thing, too, is that the Austrians can explain why employment across the board falls. I mean, because the economy is poor. And that's what I'll talk about, the importance of capital theory. It's not, the Austrians aren't just saying, oh, there's spending here, and now because interest rates are more correct, the spending patterns shift, and so everything just magically changes. No, we made malinvestments. Capital got misallocated, and so the economy, we are genuinely poorer than we otherwise would be. So that's why you have this general fall in the standard of living. And so what I did is I looked at the index, and also I disaggregated it. So I looked at construction, durable manufacturing, non-durable manufacturing, and retail. And so in the Austrian view, you would the interest rate has to do with time. And so you would think that the lower interest rate would stimulate construction more than manufacturing, because construction is like a higher order, a longer term thing. And then within the manufacturing sector, the interest rate would stimulate durable more than non-durable. And then the thing that would respond the least would be retail, because that's, you know, closer to consumption, for those of you who are familiar with these, with Austrian capital theory. And when you go and plot it, I mean, it's exactly like what you would have wanted. Like if you were doing a textbook, you might want to include the chart, because it's beautiful that from the start of the collapse of the boom to present, when I was writing this in 2010, construction fell the most, and it was the deepest trough, and then it slowly responded. Durable manufacturing fell the next hardest and then responded after a lag, and then non-durable the next, and retail fell the least. Okay, so it was, you know, disaggregating it across those sectors, they responded exactly the way you would want if you thought this had to do with interest rates and how the interest rate affects different sectors based on, you know, how durable they are or how much time they involve, which is exactly what the Austrian theory predicted. Whereas if you're trying to explain the recession and just say, yeah, people just aren't spending enough because they're afraid, and total spending is down, there's no reason. Why would total spending in construction be down more than in non-durable manufacturing? And why would, among the manufacturing, why would it matter whether it was durable or non-durable if it's just spending is down? And furthermore, you would think that if anything, retail might fall more, since the transmission is from people, you know, not spending enough, from consumers not spending enough. You would think retail would fall first, and then everything else would respond, right? So anyway, the point is just these three areas where the Keynesians were the ones who, you know, sort of picked these criteria and said, aha, see, we're better than the Austrians on this. When you went and looked at the data, you said, well, no, actually, the Austrians are better. So I think in terms of the standard scientific method, I mean, that's really a strong test when the opponents of the theory set up the criteria, and then it turns out upon closer inspection, well, no, actually, you know, the Austrians are better on that. So with that, I will stop there, and I'll take your questions.